Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Megalith 8388 Chronograph. If you're in America, you can purchase the watch from megalithwatch.com for $82. Use the discount code WR4K20OFF to get 20% discount. If you are in the UK, you can purchase the watch from amazon.co.uk for £69. Use the discount code BD8YBFW0 to get 10% off. If you're in the EU, you can purchase the watch from amazon.de for €80. Use the discount code 6L8YSIL3 to get 20% off. I'll put all the links and the respective discount codes in a pinned comment below the video. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in this black cardboard watch box. One withdraws the tray from the sleeve. There's a piece of foam to protect the watch, and the watch sits in the base of the tray inside a foam cutout panel, as one would expect. So although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch and shipping from any damage. And I think it's perfectly acceptable to use a basic cardboard watch box, bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at only €64 after discount. With regards to the items, one gets this fold-out leaflet, which gives clear, concise diagrams and clear, concise instructions of how to resize the bracelet. One also gets this owner's instruction manual, which details the terms and conditions of the 12-month warranty, and also details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko VD57 Mecha Quartz. Now, there is no warranty card, but I'm pleased to report the watch is covered by a 12-month international warranty. One also gets this bracelet resizing tool, and it's also got a spare pushpin end to it in case you bend the first one, which is good. This is the tag that comes with the watch. And lastly, one also gets this Megalith branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Megalith 8388 Chronograph. The watch is clearly an homage to the Tissot PRX Chronograph. Similar proportions, we have a 41mm case diameter. We have a 45.8mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 10.5mm. Now, the integrated bracelet at the widest point of the lugs and the integrated bracelet is 28.3mm, and it tapers from 28.3 at the widest point of the integrated lugs down to 20mm at the 2-button push deploying clasp. As you can see, the deploying clasp is signed with the Megalith brand logo engraved to a good standard. The 2-button push triggers have a nice firm resistance, and both halves of the deployant open easily. The deployant is mirror polished on the top side, underside and flanks to a reasonable standard. No sharp edges, no burrs, and it doesn't have sharp corners, it doesn't pull arm hairs. Nice curved profile to it, which wraps around the wrist very well. Snaps shut both halves very well. So the 2-button push deployant works to a good standard. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal. Now, the negative of the flat sapphire crystal is there is no AR coating, and when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see it is highly reflective, and there is a lot of glare from the applied indices, which are mirror polished, and also the applied baton hands, which are like pencil hands because they have pointed tips to the baton hands. So this really would need AR coating in order to improve the legibility, because it also has highly reflective silver subdials which have a guilloche finish to them, and really it's very shiny and reflective like a mirror when one tilts the sapphire crystal in the light. However, I think they've made the correct decision by using a flat sapphire crystal versus a double dome sapphire crystal, because it does mean that the piece is very low profile at only 10.5mm thick. Now, there's a nice bevel to the edge of the flat sapphire crystal which catches the light, so it is very aesthetically pleasing. It's just a shame it doesn't have AR coating. With regards to the dial layout, I like the symmetry of the 12, 9 and 6 o'clock subdials, and they are balanced very well with the Megalith brand logo at 3 o'clock. The date complication is white date wheel with black Arabic numerals, and they've made the correct decision by sighting it between the 4 and 5 o'clock indices rather than sighting it at the popular 3 o'clock position, because having Megalith as the logo at 3 o'clock does balance the 3 subdials at 12, 9 and 6, and the date complication between 4 and 5 is easy to read. So I think the dial layout is very good, although it does differ from the Tissot PRX Chronograph, which this is an homage to. With regards to the crown, it's a solid 316L grade stainless steel crown, push-pull crown which provides an effective hermetic seal to 100 metres, no old finish, and it's engraved to a good standard with the Megalith brand emblem. So let's test the push-pull crown execution. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication, and rotating the crown clockwise advances the quick set complication. So good legibility with a date window which is large enough to display the Arabic numerals. And as you can see, between 4 and 5 o'clock indices, it's clearly legible. Nice positive clicks to the Seiko VD57, and I really like the indexing of the quickset complication. Light resistance to it, but one can feel each day of the month clicking over with a nice positive click. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position, and the VD57 Mecha Quartz hacks, so as you can see I've now stopped the second hand dead, so it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. Nice light resistance to the VD57, no resistance in the gearing whatsoever, feels silky smooth, no backplay clockwise and anti-clockwise. There's an immediate response when one rotates the crown clockwise or anti-clockwise, the minute hand immediately moves, so no backplay is very good. Pushing it back in has got a nice positive click, and that reinstates the 100 metres of hermetic seal. So I would personally prefer to see a screw down crown rather than a push-pull crown. But however, one has to expect some cost-cutting measures because this is only €64 after discount, and therefore it's a low-tier inexpensive piece. The knurled finish is actually done very well, no sharp edges, and it is easy to grip. So let's test the chronograph pushers. We have two screwed down pushers with hexagon collars. So let's unscrew both the pushers first. Absolutely silky smooth. I'll just check the bottom pusher. Again, absolutely silky smooth. No friction in the threading whatsoever. So the hexagon collars unscrew very well on the pushers. So pressing the top pusher activates the chronograph complication. And as you can see, looking at the 12 o'clock subdial, it rotates at 1 revolution per second. So the subdial hand rotates very quickly. The main second hand continues to tick around the dial while the chronograph complication is running. Pressing the top pusher has a nice firm resistance, and that will stop the chronograph complication again. Pressing the lower pusher will reset the chronograph complication. You'll see the 12 o'clock subdial hand reset to 12. So let's test that. Perfect alignment. Both the 12 o'clock and the 6 o'clock subdial hands reset perfectly bang on 12 o'clock. This is something I really like about Seiko Mecha Quartz movements such as the VD57. The alignment on the subdials of the subdial hands is always correct. They always reset bang on 12 o'clock. So I'm just going to test it again to confirm this. You can see the top subdial at 12 o'clock is running, and also the lower subdial at 6 o'clock is also running. So I'm now going to stop it, and pressing the lower pusher will cause both subdial hands at 12 and 6 to reset. Perfect, both bang on 12 o'clock. So let's test screwing down the pushers again. Absolutely silky smooth. It's a pleasure to operate the screw down pushers, and they provide an effective hermetic seal to 100 meters, which is perfectly acceptable. So very impressed with the quality of the threading. It really is very smooth. Immediate thread pickup on the hexagon collars on the body to the pushers, and they screw down very firmly. So I'm absolutely confident in the 100 meters of hermetic seal. Right, so I'll show you the Caseback. Solid 316L grade stainless steel Caseback, engraved to good standard with the specification reference number of the piece. And in the centre section we have the Megalith brand emblem and Megalith logo text. The milled slots are well executed, no sharp edges, no burrs. The circumference of the screw down Caseback is mirror polished to a good standard, and that contrasts with the matte bead blasted effect to the centre section. Now the benefit of using a Mecha Quartz such as the Seiko VD57 is it is very low profile. Just look how low profile and flat the Caseback is. And this means that it sits very snug against the wrist, and it reduces the thickness of the piece to only 10.5 millimeters. If this were an automatic or a manual wind chronograph, it would be significantly thicker. It would be in excess of 13 millimeters. So very low profile Caseback. It feels very smooth, very well finished, very comfortable to wear against the wrist. The underside thread of the piece is very well finished, no sharp edges to the edges of the flanks, and the integrated end links in the bracelet are very well finished. They fit very well inside the head of the piece. So very well finished head to the piece. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet, I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and I'm pleased to report it fits up to my 8-inch wrist, as you can see. Now 8 inches is the maximum size this bracelet will support with all the links in. It is a tight fit to get my index finger underneath it, so I would say it's going to be too tight for an 8.5-inch wrist, but if you have a larger 7 to 8-inch wrist, you'll have no problems whatsoever. The integrated bracelet is large enough to fit up to an 8-inch wrist. Now with regards to the taper, I think they've got it correct. We are looking at 28.3 at the widest point of the integrated case and also integrated lugs, and it tapers from 28.3 very sharply down to 20mm at the 2-button push deployant. And it's got a nice large taper, and I think that works very well with the 41mm head of the piece, as you can see. Now the only negative is the end links don't articulate very well. If you look at the integrated end link in the bracelet where it joins the case, it doesn't articulate, it doesn't flex, so one does get this abhorrent gap beneath the integrated lugs and the integrated end link, even on my large 8-inch wrist. Now needless to say, if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you're going to find the effective lug-to-lug measurement of that stiff first link in the end link brace in the integrated bracelet to be too long, and therefore you're not going to feel it's comfortable. It's going to sit on top of the wrist rather than wrapping around it. And even with my large wrist, you can see there is a gap underneath the integrated bracelet at all times. So there's room for improvement with regards to the articulation of the integrated bracelet, but the rest of the links flex very well, they articulate very well and wrap around the wrist. Beautiful luster to the 316L grade stainless steel, which is brushed satin finished to a good standard. So comfort level is okay, feel good factor is good, but I dislike the way the end link kinks in the integrated bracelet. 41mm head of the piece gives good wrist presence, so I would say this is clearly a piece for a collector with a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches. If you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, you're going to find 41mm to have too much wrist presence, although it does have a relatively short lug-to-lug measurement of 45.8. although that is extended by the end link in the integrated bracelet, so it feels more like a 50 or 52, allowing for those extra end links in the integrated bracelet. Now, very low profile at 10.5, so it's easily going to slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. It is a heavy piece with all the links in the bracelet, 154 grams. If they had increased the taper down to 16mm, and if they had made the width narrower than 28.3, if they'd reduced it to 26 and had a 26 to 16 taper, that would have reduced the heft to circa 145 grams and therefore made it more comfortable. Really the biggest problem is the end link kinking, as you can see, rather than articulating. So there is room for improvement on the design of the end links in the integrated bracelet, because one does get that large gap on the first link. So comfortable piece to wear, doesn't feel top heavy, does feel balanced, but the fit isn't very good. As you can see, we do have a gap. So something to consider. I think that this really is suitable for a 7 to 8 inch wrist, but you can rule it out if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, they clearly use C3 Luminova rather than C3 Superluminova. Now, one has to expect some cost-cutting measures and be realistic. This is €68 after discounts. We're not looking at a San Martin costing €300. So I think at this price point it is acceptable to have the cost-cutting measure of using C3 Luminova. Now the negative is, with the baton hands, which are like pencil-shaped hands with the pointed tips, they aren't very large, they're very slender, and the problem is they don't allow for 5 to 6 layers of C3 Luminova to be applied, because they're not very thick hands in terms of depth. Now the other problem is the applied indices are also very slender, and they aren't very deep, so they don't allow for 5 to 6 layers. What you're looking at is clearly 2 to 3 layers of Luminova versus 5 to 6, which is the industry standard. Now, of course, at €68, one isn't going to get BGW9 or C3 Superluminova. That's unrealistic. But I do think they could apply more layers of Luminova, such as 5 to 6 on the applied indices and also 5 to 6 on the baton hands. Because as you can see on the applied indices, they've quickly faded to nothing. And although the Lume's lasting longer on the baton hands, it's also beginning to fade very quickly. So there is room for improvement. I would like to see more layers, 5 to 6 applied rather than 2 to 3. But as I've said, one has to be realistic. This is €68. We're not looking at a €300 San Martin. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. This uses the Seiko VD57 Mecha Quartz, which is made in Japan. It has a 3-year battery life. Now, the 3-year battery life is based upon you using the chronograph complication for 60 minutes per day. However, in reality, you're not going to be using the chronograph complication for anything like 60 minutes per day, and therefore it's nothing unusual for a VD57 Mecha Quartz battery to last in excess of the stated 3 years. They can last for 4 to 5 years. So I want you to consider that. You could purchase this piece and wear it daily, and providing you don't use the chronograph complication for 60 minutes per day, you could wear it for 4 to 5 years typically before needing to change the battery, and it's easy to change the battery because it has a screw down stainless steel caseback. So 3 year really is the minimum battery life. The stated accuracy of the VD57 is plus or minus 20 seconds per month. So that's not plus or minus 20 seconds per day or per week, that is per month, better than plus or minus 1 second per day accuracy. So the VD57 is reliable, well-proven workhorse movement made in Japan. Excellent accuracy at plus or minus 1 second per day, plus or minus 20 seconds per month. So excellent choice. I think Megalith deserve credit because they could have used the cost-cutting measure of using a Chinese-made Mecha Quartz movement such as the Sunon PE903, which has the same dial orientation on the sub-dials 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock respectively. And the Sunon PE903 is a popular choice for Chinese brands at this price point of €64, and it's more expensive to import the Seiko VD57 from Japan, but it is a higher quality movement than the Chinese Mecha Quartz movement such as the Sunon ones. So Megalith really deserve credit because they haven't cut corners with regards to the Mecha Quartz used. They have cut corners by not having AR coating and using 2 to 3 layers of Luminova rather than 5 to 6 layers of Super Luminova. But I think they've made the correct decision by keeping the specification of the movement strong and weakening the specification in other areas. So, lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So €80 on Amazon.de. After the 20% discount, it is €64. So I'm going to evaluate the piece based upon the discounted €64 price point. It's good quality and good value for €64, and the main basis of that is the good quality movement, the Seiko VD57 Mecha Quartz, which is made in Japan. The 2 main negatives to this watch are the lack of AR coating and the use of C3 Luminova rather than using Super Luminova. But however, there is one other negative that I want you to be aware of. The finishing to the bracelet is done to an acceptable standard. We have a beautiful luster to the brush satin finishing to the top side, underside and flanks. But however, on the edges to the flanks, on the top side and the underside to the edge of the flanks is sharp. Now, it's not sharp enough to cut your wrist and it's not going to cut your skin on your fingers, but it is sharp nonetheless, and it's something I want you to be aware of. Now, the other thing is the integrated links do have sharp corners. Now, the case is finished to a better standard. The mirror polishing to the bezel is flawless, the brush satin finishing to the flanks is flawless, and the top edge of the lugs have a nice mirror polished bevel. Now, you see that mirror polished bevel, that is done to a very good standard. There's no sharp edge to the top edge of the case, and the underside to the flanks is also chamfered very well. I would like to see Megalith also have the same kind of bevel that they've got on the top edge of the case, machined on the edge of the flanks, both on the top side and the underside to the bracelet, because that would remove the sharp edge. So as I said, it's not sharp enough to cut the wrist or cut your fingers, but it does feel sharp when you feel it. So on wrist it is noticeable. One can feel the sharp edge to the bracelet on the underside and also the top side, so that's something to bear in mind. But on a positive note, it articulates very well with the exception of the stiff end link, and it does have some rattle and play in the links, but I'm not going to be heavily critical of this because one has to expect this at €64. We're not looking at a €300 San Martin as I've discussed with the Lume, and one is going to get a rattly bracelet at this price point. Overall, I think it's good quality and good value, but bear in mind the shortcomings of the lack of AR coating, the weak Luminova, and also the sharp edges on the flanks to the bracelet. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Megalith 8388 Chronograph. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.